Welcome back to the podcast, Rated R for Revenue. Today, we're going to have a really kind of candid conversation about how to manage both your money, how to project, and that sort of systematic stuff, but also your emotions and your mindset when unexpected things arise and pop up, both in your business and in your personal life. Because something happened recently in Becca's home life, actually, that just a bunch of unexpected things came up, as they seem to do in your house, and just some of the ways that we were able to identify some blocks in your system and some things that you actually weren't doing, that even you were like, why wasn't I doing that? So I'm really excited to have this conversation because it was such an eye-opener, and just a reminder that even coaches need coaches, right? Like, Becca is so good with money and this is what she does. And even she needed somebody to go, hey, wait a minute, like somebody with outside eyes to go, why aren't you looking at it this way? So Becca, can you just walk us through, give us some context? What happened in your house recently? And how were you feeling? Like, what was going on?
Yes. So this house, basically, by the time we're done with it, everything will be brand new. So it was this past week. I was playing outside with the kids. Max came in to use the bathroom and told me there was no water to wash his hands. And I was like, well, what do you mean? We just had water. For those of you who don't know, we're in a well. So when we don't have water, it's an issue that we have to take care of. It's not a city problem. So fast forward 24 hours and we got a really sizable bill for a new water heater, and they found a giant leak behind one of our walls that honestly would not have been found had the water heater not decided that it was done for that day. So it was a blessing in disguise for that reason. However, in that moment, it did not feel like a blessing. I could feel all of the emotions and all of the thoughts and the mindset that I had last year with all of these expenses that just kept piling on. The sicknesses were piling on. The kids being home all the time were piling on. That's what started to creep in, and I could feel the anxiety. I could literally feel it creeping up my chest. And I basically went to Voxer and I was like, Marley, you are not going to believe this. Like, here we go again. And she was like, well, let's actually look at your numbers and pull yourself out of your current emotions and put yourself in the data. Like, what is the data saying to you? So I pulled up my numbers for Marley, and I was like, look at all these expenses. Like, I've been trying to tighten my expenses. And she said, but have you scrolled down to see the profit line at the bottom? Have you put in all of your revenue for the entire year?
Because you had MRR built out. You had a bunch of new clients on payment plans. So you actually have MRR that you could be projecting out.
Right.
But you were simply projecting out your expenses and really zooming in on those.
Yes, I've been working so hard on tightening expenses, and not from a scarcity perspective, but like, does this actually need to happen in order to run my business? Is this moving the needle? Yes or no? So I've been so zoned into that. When this expense happened for our personal, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. And so we did look at my revenue, my MRR, and we looked at my profit, and Marley was like, what? Like, just stop for a second and look at the numbers. And I did. And I am, well, as we record this today, exactly $17 away from 50K in revenue already this year. And it's March 27th. And I only share numbers like this with you because I know you're in the same situations. I know the same things happen to you. I know you're really good at what you do, and you're focused on all of the things that are piling on as opposed to how far you have moved your business so far. So that's the only reason we talk about this today. Marley basically pulled me in through the screen and was like, what are you doing? Like, look at these numbers and tell me that you don't feel a little bit better. And it actually did relieve a lot of stress immediately. Not that anything had changed. Literally nothing had changed about the situation, right? But my mind all of a sudden was like, oh, I am making money.
Right.
Like, I do have money. I do have an income. One of my biggest I guess one of the things I've been concentrating on this year is making sure I am helping provide for the family, because last year I felt like I didn't or I couldn't. This year, it was the number one goal for me to make sure that there was enough profit that I could be using that for my family, that I could be spoiling my kids, that I could be taking time off of work if I wanted to. And so I've been so focused on that that this felt like a major setback when in
Yeah.
fact it was literally like a little speed bump.
Yeah, and I want to paint a visual for everyone. So Becca, in your tracking, you had, your expense. So we all have these, right? Like our email service is $20 a month, and we've got these expenses that we know. So Becca, in your spreadsheet, so for everyone to visualize what this looked like, because this is such a common, easy thing to do. You had projected out for the whole year all of those exact expenses because you know them. They are black and white. They're this amount, that amount. And then there's the few odd expenses that pop up here and there of little extras. So it's very easy to track expenses and project expenses for the year, right? Um, and on your spreadsheet with your profit, what you were doing, it wasn't that you weren't tracking your profit. Obviously, you do that. You're a money coach. Like this is 101 for you. But what you hadn't done, because you were looking at payment plans, you were plugging in the profit, or the revenue, I should say, the money that was coming in as it came in. You weren't projecting it out. And that was just like a little blind spot that you were like, oh, you're right. Why didn't I do that? Why was I not in here? But it was because where your focus was at the time. So
Mhm.
that's where I was like, what are you doing? Tell me what your money is that you are projecting coming in. Like, let's put this in here. I was so excited. Like, I want to see what it's projected at. And suddenly now you get the full picture of, here's what my expenses will be in June of 2023. And here's my projected profit. Like, these are contracts signed. This isn't like maybe money, right?
Right.
So that was the visual of and a very big, like when you're looking at numbers for December 2023 and you're projecting your expenses but not profit, you're going to see a big negative old number at the end of the year. And that's hard to look at when you're not also looking at the money you've already secured for the business. Or even just a really solid, like, I never go below this much in my money or in my
Yes.
business.
Yes. Like, I always preach worst case scenario. Like, what's worst case scenario? Your brain wants to go there. So let's just go. Let's go hang out with it for a minute and find out what that actually looks like. Worst case scenario, your brain makes it out to be a lot more worse than it actually, a lot more worse. Is that
I know what
that
you
doesn't
meant.
sound
It's
right.
fine.
Whatever. It makes it feel harder than it typically is.
Yes.
So I was living in worst case scenario, and I was actually in real life, like, living best case scenario, but my brain wanted me to believe the opposite. And for those of you who don't, you're like, projection, okay, great. What the heck does that even mean? Like, people say it all the time. I'm going to read you the actual definition of projection. It's an estimate or a forecast of a future situation based on the study of present situations. So basically, what you're doing is, this is how much I make this month. I know that these payment plans are going to be coming in for the next 6 months. So I know based on that what my worst case, I'm doing air quotes, worst case scenario status is for the next 6 months. Do I need to sell more? Do I need to cut back on my expenses? What is happening in business and in your head, honestly, in your head?
Yeah. And it was like, a 2-minute exercise where we plugged in the rest of those numbers and you're like, oh my gosh, you're right. And it was like in 2 minutes, your entire being changed, right? You felt relief. Like, I remember I asked you, how did you feel before looking at the profit projections? And some of the things that you had said was that well, do you want to share, like, how were you feeling before we looked at the profit projections?
Like, doom and gloom. Like, this, why does this continue to feel so hard when I have made leaps and bounds in business compared to last year, right? Why do I continue to get setbacks? Why are the setbacks so big? Why can't they just be like, you know, a faucet needs to be changed, or like, we didn't have the water turned on all the way, just turn the knob a little bit more. Like, why can't these things be the setback? So I was really going into, I slid right back into that victim mentality that I had all of last year. And then when I saw the profit, I saw the revenue, and then actually what I was bringing home to my family, I was like, oh This is why people say 6 figures is so easy. This is why people are saying, well, 100K is really not that much money. And it is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. It is a lot of money. But when you are consistent in your messaging, when you're consistent in your business, when you know your numbers and you know exactly what you do, how you help, and how you're going to do that, that's when everything comes together. And that's how I felt this year. Like everything came together and there was like this little pretty bow on it. And then the water heater broke and it was like someone just stomped on my present. When in fact, that was not what happened at all. So, knowing the projections, knowing my future forecast of revenue without selling another thing the whole year, I felt like in 3 months, it's doable for me to be to 6 figures for the year already. Like all of a sudden, I had excitement. And it was like, oh, let's just pay the water heater stuff and keep it moving. Like it
Yeah.
felt fun. It felt fun and doable and exciting again.
And I want to highlight that you had specifically said to me two things that we hear all the time from business owners, which is you said I was feeling like I had been signing clients, like my business was picking up. It felt like I've had so many wins.
Mhm.
So how is this it? How am I still in this position when something arises unexpectedly? And another thing you had said to me was like I was feeling like, okay, well, wait, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I'm not selling enough. Even though I've had a lot of wins, it's still not enough. And
Mhm.
that's still not enough feeling. We hear it all the time from the women that come into your Mind Your Business program when they first get started. Like that's a big fear, is like it's never enough. I never have enough. It's always just not enough. But you
Right.
actually had more than enough, obviously.
Mhm.
And just that little shift in perspective and in what you were looking at in terms of the data changed everything for you.
It did, and then you just made me think of something else. You know how all over social media, this may not be totally true now, but it was 10K months, 10K months. When you get to 10K months, you know you've made it. You may not even need 10K. You may not even need 5K months to live the life that you really want to live. And that's where I think I was getting caught up in, okay, well, maybe I'm not making enough. And then I got to the profit line of my tracking, and it was like, you have more than enough. If you didn't do a single thing for the rest of the year, you have more than enough to take care of what you need to take care of right now with this issue, this um, crisis in your house. You need water, and you have plenty to provide for your family while you still run your business the way that you want to run it. And that's when I was like, okay, okay. Like, I've been so caught up in what could we pull back on that's not serving us at all that I forgot that I am serving my family. My income is serving my family. It is serving my business. So, I just want you to know, even though I have a really good system for my money, and I had it all there. I knew, like, rationally, I knew, but when your emotions take over, this is a perfect example of data, not drama, data over drama. I was really caught up in the drama of things happening very quickly in our house again, and I forgot to go back to the data. For a second, my brain didn't let me remember that I needed to go look at the numbers. I needed to go look at the data. And so, if you don't have somebody in your life that's like, whoa, 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 like pause for just a second, pause your spin for just a moment, and let's look at the numbers. You need that person desperately.
So I want to ask you one final question, but before that, can you just share? I hope you're okay with this, because I know once you recognize those numbers, you were like, "Oh my gosh, I could literally be doubling that before June." Like this is rated R for revenue. We talk real numbers here. Like that would be 100K in half the year.
Yeah.
And that's money that you've never made in your career before. Like that's a big deal. And I know you told me you told your husband that. What did he say to you?
He said, he looked at me, he had a weird look on his face, one that I don't see often, so I couldn't read him, and he goes, "Okay, but I just don't want you to let this get to your head."
I'm just over here changing our family's financial future, and you're worried about it going to my head. I love that. Like, he's not even worried about the money. He's just literally there to support you. And that was just
No,
totally representative of like his heart isn't even about the money. He just wants you to be happy doing what you do. And he's like, and just make sure we keep you on earth here. Okay.
no, the money it's never, nothing is about the money for him. And that's why sometimes I feel frustrated because I'm like, but it is about the money. Like, my mom has told me my whole life, you cannot live on love. Like, you can't live on love. And I have never felt that more than last year when we were going through crisis after crisis after crisis. And so I'm like, okay, we have the love. Like, let's make sure the money is also taken care of. And he
Yeah.
was like, I just don't want you to be like a brat about this. And I was like, but did you hear me?
I'm going to be just for a minute because it's really exciting. Okay. So I want to wrap this all up in a pretty bow for our listeners. So what do you want our friends who are listening to know about tracking expenses and projecting profit?
I want you to know that it's where the power comes from. So, like, if you're only looking at expenses, that's where you kind of feel disempowered, right? That's what I was feeling. If we wrap it up in a really nice word, disempowered, I was feeling like I didn't have choices anymore. That makes me feel like I'm pushed into a cage, right? Like I'm pushed into a corner. I don't have choices. When you know your revenue, so the income that you have coming in, when you know your expenses and you know how much profit that leaves you, you have the power back. That's where your power comes from. That's where you get to move your business where you want to move it. That's where decisions become easier, who to hire, when to hire, how much you can pay them. That's when things get exciting because you have possibilities. There are choices. Everything feels like it's possible again. And that's where you want to live. It's okay if you have a spiral once in a while. Marley pulls me out of a spiral like, I don't know, frequently. I wouldn't say weekly, but at least once a
And the other
quarter.
way, you pull me out too.
Right. We're known for like grabbing each other in the middle of a spiral, but I think that it's important to know that knowing your numbers gives you that power. So if you're feeling like that's confusing or frustrating or oh, it feels like it's going to take forever to do, just know that that little bit of work that it takes to get all of your numbers in one place gives you every decision making power that you need in your business and for your family.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you do inside of Minor Business with the women that are inside there is you help them get that full picture of their finances, where they're at exactly, and give them the tools to be able to track. That's where I started. That's the only reason I was able to have that conversation with you, and how I've been able to now create books for 3 different businesses. So in the last year, 6 months even, because I had that foundational skill that I learned from Becca back in my original days when I started online a couple of years ago, that has allowed me to grow and expand from there with all of the businesses that my husband and I now run together. So it is an absolute game changer when you can just change your perspective on your finances. And you can't change your perspective when you don't know what your numbers are.
Mhm.
And knowing your numbers just makes everything feel possible. And oh, it just gives so much relief. Like, I could take a breath right now and just feel the relief that I felt when I first got all my numbers onto one piece of paper and was able to look at them and see with clarity what was possible and how much sooner I could hire my first VA than I thought I would ever have been able to do. And just so many decisions that became easier to make because I had the data in front of me to be able to make them from information and not from emotion.
Mhm.
So, I want our listeners, so I want to just add to that. I want our listeners to know that okay, I'll tell from my experience. I want you to know that tracking expenses and projecting profit will give you so much emotional freedom. I call it brain space because for me, my brain is a busy place. Okay. And it's busy at work, it's busy in day to day, it's busy with my family and my kids and managing all the things. It's busy. And one of the reasons I've been able to get to this place of having multiple businesses, learning how to manage the finances for all of them, it's continuing to build my coaching business online, like doing all of these things. And then never mind, like I am a projects girl. If you knew the projects we had going on in this house, you would think I was insane. I think I'm a little insane. But it's because I know the numbers that I'm able to, and I'm able to without being like a psycho.
Yeah. Oh, that's the important part.
What's that?
That's the important part. Take away the psycho.
Yeah, knowing my numbers prevents me from being a psycho. Like if we could just put that into a pretty bow, that's what it does. It keeps me really peaceful. It keeps me feeling in control. And when I feel in control, I'm nicer to my family. Like that's the bottom line. I'm nicer to myself. I'm nicer to my family, and I'm the person that I like to be. And when I was not tracking my expenses, didn't know my numbers, there was just a lot more of a roller coaster consistently happening. When those unexpected expenses come up, it's a lot harder to keep it cool and consistent when you are feeling anxious about your finances, because like money doesn't make the world go round, but it always makes things easier. Absolutely, it does. So if I could give you one takeaway from this, it's just like, even if it takes a piece of paper, like Becca says, just bullet down. What are your expenses on an average month? And then what is your average income? And look at that number and just start getting familiar with it. Look at your numbers, play with them. You don't need a system. It doesn't need to be perfect if you're just trying to get started and you just have a piece of paper and a pen in front of you. But it can give you so much clarity and information so that you can start making really important decisions as a business owner, a mom, a wife, a family manager, all the things.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. If you need real help, if you're like paper and pen is not going to cut it, and you want someone to literally hold your hand and walk you through the process, Mind Her Business is probably for you. And so registration enrollment closes this Friday, March the 31st. So if you know it's for you and you know that getting control of your money will help your business, your mental capacity, and really your family, if that's what you want and that's what you know you could get from it, just DM me on Instagram and let's have a conversation and see if it is right for you. One thing that you will never get from me is roped into something that is not right for you, because if it's not right for you, then it is not right for me. So let's just have a conversation and see if maybe this is the next best step for you. And I hope I hear from you.